Right. So today what I want to talk about is why and how to set up an intercessory prayer shield. My mom always used to tell me, she's like, your grandma Nellie always used to say, more things are brought about by prayer than this world dreams of. And there are handouts on the back table. So Holly, do you want to grab those and hand those out? Thank you. She said, more things are brought about by prayer than this world dreams of. And when my mom would talk about prayer warriors, there was always this like awe in her voice and like this hush and this just this reverence. And I remember thinking like, I want to grow up to be a prayer warrior. Like it sounds powerful, it sounds exciting. And my mom just had this respect for it that spoke something to my heart. And so I'm sure I didn't really completely understand it. But I also knew the stories of Moses interceding for Joshua when Aaron and Hur held up his hands, and while his hands were up in prayer, Joshua was winning the battle. Esther asking for intercession before she went before the king to intercede physically for her people. Of the early church earnestly praying for Peter not to be killed like James had been, and the angel busted him out of prison, and Herod died soon after, right? So I had heard these stories, but I hadn't knowingly experienced it myself yet. And sometimes until we have that like hit you in the face spiritual warfare moment, we tend to go, I don't know, is that really true? And we doubt warfare for one. For two, we doubt the power of prayer. Anybody with me on that? Okay. And so when I first stepped into working full-time in ministry straight out of college, I felt like I got hit by a Mack truck. And I didn't fully understand what hit me. I knew kind of in my head about spiritual warfare, but it felt like everything in my life went haywire. I was living in a black mold apartment and had to try to get out of my lease because I was getting sick. Car problems, relationship problems, financial, you name it, it felt like everything in my life started going haywire. Thankfully, there was this wise older lady at my church that I would go to for prayer. And I went to her and she goes, oh honey, do you have anyone praying for you? You just stepped into ministry. And I weekly was like, I think my mom prays for me, which is great. And there's power in a praying mom, but she goes, oh honey, it's gonna be like this in ministry if you don't get some people covering you in prayer. And so thankfully I listened. And I went and gathered a team of 10 people, some friends, some family, pastor, and I started emailing them on a weekly, regular basis with prayer requests. And immediately, I don't kid, the warfare became livable. It didn't go away all the way, but it became livable and manageable. And so began my love of intercessors and knowing the importance of it because I experienced it so vividly. And I remember experiencing other things that really helped me understand this even more. I stepped into different spiritual classes or experiences, and BSF. I stepped into leadership in BSF for a while, Bible Study Fellowship, and I remember always feeling this uptick in warfare and going like, oh yeah, okay, and ask people to pray, and you got to kind of battle through it and rough it out, right? But I remember when I stepped into a ministry school, Dare to Believe, and I was there for a couple weeks, maybe a month, and all of a sudden I'm like, where's the warfare? I was so used to when I stepped into a spiritual experience like that there was always this uptick in warfare. And so I was just mulling on that, and I went to school one of the nights, and I looked in the back of the room, and all of a sudden it clicked for me. They had 6 to 8 intercessors that sat in the back of the class that prayed over this class of 10 to 12 people. And I walked up to them and I'm like, it's you! It's you! And they're like, what do we do? I'm like, you're why I'm not feeling this, like, I got hit by something because I stepped into a new spiritual experience. And so again, it reinforced that, wow, intercession is powerful, and it makes things a lot more pleasant and easier to step into without feeling like you got hit. Now, did I always remember to ask for prayer? Absolutely not. Okay. And so there was one time I went with a classmate and we went to minister at Comic-Con which is a secular gathering of people who love, comic stories, comic movies, all those sorts of things. And we started trying to minister. Nobody would talk to us. I mean, nobody would talk to us. And we were not used to that because we were used to a lot of favor when we would go out and do ministry. And that we would have these great encounters and get to pray for people and pray for healing and all this sort of stuff. And it was like nothing. And we stopped and we were like, what is going on? And finally we went, duh. We didn't tell anybody that we were going to do ministry there. We didn't ask for any prayer cover whatsoever. And so we paused and we both started texting people that we knew, said, hey, will you cover us in prayer? We're doing this stuff. We're doing ministry. And then we waited for like a half hour just to make sure. And when we stepped back into ministering, immediately, 2 great encounters with people that actually lasted a really long time and were awesome. Okay, again, solidifying for me, wow, you can do way more if you have prayer cover. And military speaking, if you have air support for your ground troops, it's going to be a lot more effective, right? And that's what I see intercessors as. They are that air support for the ground team, okay? While I worked at Minnesota Adult and Teen Challenge, I definitely experienced warfare, very frontline work there, a lot of spiritual warfare as you're trying to help people come out of addiction. And it was interesting because I taught, I did classroom teaching. We had a 3-month curriculum that looped, and there was a 1 week of that 3-month curriculum that was on breaking strongholds. And we talked about breaking strongholds of anger and unforgiveness and sexual sin and occult and things like that. And I always made sure that I had an intercessor, another staff member in the classroom while I was teaching it, because by this point I wasn't stupid. I wasn't born yesterday. And so it was interesting because I didn't get to pick who that person was. It was whoever had time that was on staff and could sit in the back of the classroom. But I could tell when they were engaged or when they were on their phone not praying. When I could tell when I had a really strong intercessor in my classroom, because there was so much freedom to teach. I didn't get lost. All these illustrations would drop into my mind like that. People would ask questions and I just had the answers, and that's something that's hard for me. And there were no what I call pop-ups in the classroom of clients being rebellious or asking angry questions. I would get just real heartfelt questions. It was amazing. And I would go up to those staff afterwards where I felt that freedom, and I'd be like, you're an intercessor. And they'd be like, what? I'm like, I could feel your prayers. I could feel the freedom in this room to teach. And those staff that sometimes were just out of it and on their phone or whatever, I could feel I was fighting pop-ups in the room. I was fighting not being able to remember where I was in my curriculum or not being able to come up with answers for questions. And it was hard. It felt like pushing through stuff, okay? That's the difference that intercession could make. And there was one time I had a lot of warfare going on in my personal life, and I stepped into teaching breaking strongholds of occult. And in the middle of that class, I had a fight break out in my classroom, and I thought one girl was going to punch another girl. I had never had that before, never had it again. And I walked out of that class and I'm like, what the heck happened? That has never, ever happened to me before in this class. And then I went, oh my gosh, I forgot to have an intercessor in my classroom. Are you kidding me? No wonder. I didn't forget that again. So I've heard that every revival can be pointed back to an intercessor. One intercessor that started praying and then gathered more intercessors. And then the Lord raises up a teacher and revival starts. But it starts with an intercessor that started praying. We often say all I can do is pray, when really we need to strike that from our vocabulary and say the most powerful thing I can do is pray. So I want to ask you this: how much is warfare limiting your impact? Okay, we're used to admitting that prayer is powerful, and that and there's a lot of powerful prayer warriors in this room right here. But do we often also ask for that same power in prayer to be pointed at us, to be pointed at our families, to be pointed at our ministries and our children? Okay. Do we ask for help in the form of prayer, or do we think we can go it alone and cover all our own stuff without asking for help? Are we timid about asking for prayer support? And lots of it, okay? Not just one or two. Why is that? We know the power of prayer. We know the importance of prayer. Sometimes we know it here, but we forget it here, okay? And so why wouldn't we want that power of prayer pointed at what's most important to us, okay? And I was thinking about, if you were in charge of transporting the Hope Diamond somewhere, would you want like one guy with a big stick covering it? Or would you want a whole, battalion with a lot of firepower protecting that, because it's extremely valuable and people would want to take it, people would want to steal it, right? What you carry is extremely valuable to the kingdom of God and to the kingdom of Satan, right? And so we need to protect it, because we are in a war and we are in a battle, and we have to remember that. So what you do is precious. What are you doing to protect it? And I mean, whether your main career is raising children, being a dental hygienist, in our healing ministry, a teacher, a pastor, I don't care what you do. Who you are and what you do is valuable to the kingdom of heaven. And because of who you carry. What you carry is powerful no matter what realm you're in. If the realm is the home, if the realm is out in the world, if the realm is in ministry, it doesn't matter. It's valuable. So just take a second, and I want you to ask the Lord, why haven't I engaged more prayer from others in what I have going on in my life? And just see what pops in your mind. Why haven't I engaged more prayer from others in what I have going on in my life? And I want you to write it down, whatever comes to mind. And I encourage you to chat with Jesus about whatever you wrote down and work through it, because we need to get through our hang-ups of why maybe we're not asking for help, or we're not asking maybe for as much help as we need to be covered in prayer. I remember working at Teen Challenge and feeling the weight of the warfare pressing down, and I would think about sending a message to my intercessors. And then immediately this mental battle would start, like, oh really? You need help for that? Like, oh my gosh, you're such a weak Christian. I can't believe you can't even handle this by yourself. And shame would start trying to stop me. Now, sometimes it worked at the beginning, but I got wise where I went, oh, I really need to send a prayer text, okay? The enemy's trying to stop me with shame. And that means he's scared of me doing this. That's how important it is. And so I would send the prayer text, and I kid you not, within 30 minutes, usually, I could feel the warfare lift to where it was much more manageable and doable to keep going. I could feel the load lighten because I was sharing the load with others that were helping lift it, okay? It's like those odd pieces of furniture that they're not very heavy, but they're awkward to carry, right? And if you get multiple people carrying it, it's like no big deal, okay? And that's how it is with our life and our load. It may not even be that heavy of a load, but if you get multiple people carrying it, then everybody can just enjoy the experience and not feel like they're dying, okay? I'm passionate about helping individuals, businesses, and ministries to assemble these prayer shields for themselves, get intercessors praying over you, because I know the difference it can make in your quality of life and in how much you can actually help people and not be run ragged by warfare. I started reading this book that was recommended to me. It's called Prayer Shield by C. Peter Wagner. I highly recommend it. I'm not all the way through it, but it is so encouraging me about the power of prayer. And he's telling stories in their churches that would have 70% growth in their evangelistic efforts when they started covering those efforts in prayer. Okay? Imagine your business, your ministry, your church, your family. As you get that prayer coverage, what could happen and how much easier it could be, because it allows you to help more people and to help them better and not be run ragged by warfare. Okay? I don't love seeing a beat up Christian. That's not how we want it to be. Now, I really stumbled through setting up my first prayer team. I didn't really have any other direction besides you should have people praying for you. Okay? So I just did the best I could in assembling a team, and I've learned some things along the way. And recently the Lord has connected me with the concept of paid intercessors as well, and introduced me to someone from the Apostolic Intercessors Network that walked me through some best practices of how to do this. I'm creating what she calls a prayer shield, okay? So I'm going to share a mix of some of what I've done as well as some of the new things that I'm now learning that I'm excited to share about. Now there's two ways to do this in setting up a prayer shield. You can set up your own team or you can pay someone else to do it for you, okay? Now, first we'll talk about setting up your own because that's been mostly my experience. And then I've only recently been introduced to the concept that there are resources out there of people that will take that kind of load off of you and do some of that administrative stuff for you. Now, if you bristle at the thought of paying an intercessor, or think that's wrong of someone to get paid to do that, do you have a problem with paying your pastor, your youth pastor, your worship leader, your children's director, your youth director, your volunteer director? These are all positions that take time and energy. And 1 Timothy 5:18 says, don't muzzle the ox while they're treading the grain. The worker deserves his wages. And just like with all those other positions, this takes time and energy and focus. And if you don't want somebody trying to do it just part-time on the side, it's helpful if you can take that weight off of them so that they can focus on what you need them to do. It takes time and intention. So if you don't have a lot of money, set it up yourself and ask people to volunteer. If you have more money than time, pay someone else to do it, okay? So there's 4 steps to creating a prayer shield. We're going to start with here. First off is pray and ask Jesus who to ask, okay? Then it's just ask them to be on your team, choose a method of communication that works for you, and then send weekly updates to your team, okay? So we'll talk through these just a little bit. Who do you ask? It needs to be people, obviously, that you trust and that you can be totally vulnerable with so that you can be honest about what you need prayer for. Those who have integrity and can keep confidentiality. It's really sacred space what you're inviting somebody into, and so you need to be able to trust them and let them know, like, hey, unless you hear me talking about this in public, please don't mention anything that I express in my prayer updates. And just state the obvious to them so that they know up front. Pick people whose lives you're invested in. You need to feel comfortable having regular connection with them and them knowing some of the deepest things about your life. They need to be willing to take on that responsibility and that warfare as well for you. You need people who gaze at God and glance at the enemy. I love that statement. You need people that are victorious in their way that they look at warfare, okay? Not people that are kind of in this victim mentality about warfare. Consider how much warfare they are already experiencing and be kind. If their personal warfare is super high and they're going through a season where they're really struggling in their own personal life, it might not be the best time to ask them, or ask that they first get some of their own intercessors covering them personally before they join your intercessor team, okay? Just let them know if their personal warfare ever kicks up too high, that it's okay for them to say, hey, I need to step off for a season while I get through this, okay? Whatever crisis they're dealing with. I encourage people to start with 2 or 3. Many people tell me they don't feel like they have anybody they could ask. I'm like, well, let's ask Jesus first of all, because he probably knows. But who do you talk to when you're in crisis? Who do you trust? But Jesus can really bring people to mind, or he can even bring new people into your life if you start praying and say, Lord, who can I trust with this role in my life? Or who can I ask that might know people that I could trust, okay? I was kind of surprised when I looked this up and started counting, but I currently have 7 intercessors over my personal life. I have 5 specifically over my business, and I have 18 over Prayer Hub, okay? Because I believe in this, and I know that it helps make things so much easier. I have 1 person that overlaps in all those lists. That's kind of my head intercessor. As I was stepping into deeper spiritual work in my business, I knew that I needed a higher level of coverage because I was stepping into some stuff that was bigger. And so that was when I kind of assembled some extra people to pray over that specifically, because I didn't actually want to put that load on my personal intercessors. Okay, so that's why I created an extra team for my business. That could be all one list if you wanted it to be. That's just kind of what's developed over time with me. So how many do you need? How many intercessors do you need? Let your warfare decide, or let Jesus tell you when you need to add more, okay? If you're getting blasted, even though you have intercessors, you probably need to add more. If your intercessors are getting blasted, you probably need to add more. It's the whole idea, if you have 15 friends come and help you move, everybody has fun. If you have 5 friends come and help you move, they never want to be your friend again, right? So make sure that you have enough, that it's a light enough load for everybody. He'll let you know when you need to increase your shield. Ask them for a 1-year commitment. This is a new concept for me. This is not something that I knew to do at the beginning, but it makes a lot of sense. There's a 1-year commitment, and then there's a natural out. If they want to get off the team, they know that my commitment ends at this time and I can graciously step out, okay? And then just ask each year if they want to re-up. Melanie Boudreau from Apostolic Intercessor Network that I spoke with, she said she re-ups everybody in June. And at first I thought that was kind of a weird time of the year. But then as I thought about it, I'm like, actually that makes a lot of sense. It's not around the holidays when everybody is like stressed out and tired out and just like, I don't want anything more on my plate. You know, it's kind of in the middle of the year when it's calmer. So that is, I think, a helpful thing. I tell people when you ask them to be on your team, just be super upfront. Like, hey, would you be okay if I message you on kind of like a weekly basis? Sometimes it might be daily if I'm going through a hard time. And would you be willing to pray for me? And just, I'm not asking you to pray for me every single day. I am asking that you have me on your intercessor wavelength, so to speak. Like that you will pay attention when the Lord brings me to your mind, that you will cover me and pray for me, or when I reach out and ask for prayer. Just have me on your radar when the Lord prompts you to pray for me. Encourage feedback from them and then take it with humility. Just let them know, hey, you have a free pass to text me, to contact me. And again, encourage them if their personal warfare picks up too much to feel free to step down for a season if they need to. And I have some intercessors that they will never really respond to my messages that I send out, but they have told me like, hey, I don't respond to group messages, but I will be praying every time I see it, okay? Third, pick a method of communication. It needs to be easy and quick for you, okay? And it needs to fit you and your intercessors. Most importantly, it needs to fit you, because if you're not going to use it, it's no good to you, right? But also, if it doesn't fit your intercessors, like if you try to do Facebook Messenger and they're all over 70, not helpful, okay? So you need to pick something that's going to work for everyone, but it's easy and quick for you. I used to use email, now I use a text group. Other people I know like pick an app like Signal or create a Facebook Messenger group, whatever works best for you, that you always have access to. I don't send out individual messages to everybody on my team. That would take too long and I wouldn't do it, okay? I send one group text. Now, a new concept for me is Melanie encourages that even if you group message your intercessors, you blind carbon copy them so that your intercessors don't necessarily know who each other are and they don't know how many are on your team. And her point is, if people on your team know that you have 17 people on your team, they won't pray as hard as if they think there's 4. Okay? And also, if they are giving you feedback about what the Lord is telling them, then it's unadulterated. Like they haven't heard what anybody else is saying. It's just strictly what they're hearing from the Lord. And if you hear it from multiple ones, then you're like, okay, it feels like this is the Lord speaking, okay? Now, I haven't yet implemented this for my team, but I also wasn't asking for a high level of like prophetic feedback when I started, because that's not where I was at when I started. And so start where you're at and just build on it, okay? The fourth is send weekly updates to your team. I always tell people start with weekly to get yourself in the habit, okay? I don't necessarily have a schedule because it is ingrained in me, and I can kind of feel when the warfare starts building and I'm like, whoop, it's been too long. I need to get myself back on their radar, okay? It is your responsibility to keep yourself on their radar, not theirs to remember, okay? So I need to keep giving them enough information and specific things to pray for. We all know after a while praying vaguely for somebody gets really boring, okay? And so having specifics is helpful and it's focusing. And also having follow-up of what happened. I'm getting better at this. I used to be really bad at this, and some of my intercessors would be like, well, what happened? You know? And it's always more fun if you're praying for something, if somebody comes back and goes, thank you so much for praying, it went really great, or this is what happened. And so give them that feedback. Keep your updates short and compelling. Don't be super wordy so that it doesn't take a lot of time for them to get through it, okay? Did you want to ask your question?
Before you had said to not have the intercessors meet each other, whenever I've done this, we always
Did meetings or groups?
Yeah, I've just done I would do a monthly Zoom meeting, so they all met each other.
Yep. And that's I think that's a valid.
Each other was so.
Yeah, I'm still weighing what I think about that.
Yeah.
That was kind of her point of I think she's really asking for prophetic feedback from the intercessors, and so there's value in them not talking to each other, and you know that it's not because one person said it or they heard it from somebody else. I think that's what she's getting at. But there's also a camaraderie that comes from having the team get together, and meet each other and pray together. So I don't know that there's a right or wrong to it. It's just what are you looking for from your team too. But I think that's valid as well. Yeah. If you ever feel unable to be vulnerable with your group, you need to check in with Jesus. Is it because you're having a shame or vulnerability issue going on that you need to deal with? Or is it because you have someone on the team that you no longer feel safe with? Okay? For any number of reasons. Maybe your lives have drifted and you don't have enough contact with them anymore, and so it just kind of feels awkward. Maybe there's something that's happened and the relationship is drifting, or whatever it might be. Either fix it or you need to change your team. Okay? I've had to shift my team over the years as relationships have faded in and out. And so just make sure that you can feel vulnerable and share vulnerably, okay? Don't be sheepish about asking. What you do and who you help is precious. Protect it. Whether it's your kids or whether it's a ministry or a business, what you do is valuable to the kingdom of God. So don't be sheepish about it. You're more helpful in whatever you do if you're covered and you're not just getting smashed by warfare, okay? And when I say getting smashed by warfare, it can be your stress level, your internal stress level. It can be that every time you do a task, it takes 5 times longer than it should. Or every time you do something, somebody undoes it. Or every time you try to push through a door, there's 5 times the red tape that there should be. Or you're getting pushback from people all the time. Or it could be illness, financial issues, all sorts of things that can just be harassing and annoying and don't necessarily have to be there, okay? And so even military, police, and firefighters know this, and they always send somebody with a partner, right? They always send them out in twos. Jesus sent his disciples out in twos. So stop thinking that you're more valuable to the kingdom if you're a lone ranger, because you're really not. And don't think you're more spiritual if you do it yourself, right? And I have totally done that. And so I can point the finger at myself as well. A lone soldier is a dead soldier, okay? So don't do it. You can get some stuff done, but it's like walking through wet cement when you try to do ministry without prayer cover. I have done that. I don't recommend it. Wouldn't you rather just run to your objective without anything holding you back, okay? That's what happens when we cover each other, all right? And if you are having people on your intercessor team, it is not necessarily saying I'm going to cover everybody on my intercessor team. I'm asking them to pray for me. That can sound selfish, but this is what I need right now. Now, am I also on other people's intercessor teams? Yes, I am, okay? But I also carefully consider who I add myself to. I ask the Lord if I'm supposed to be on this team, because I have to consider my level of warfare, all right? And what's going on and how much I can handle and what God's calling me into versus what I just think is nice, all right? When you ask for prayer from your intercessors, teach your intercessors about the advantage of strategic intercession versus just crisis intercession by how you ask for requests. So don't only message when you're pinned down, like help, okay? Now, I was really bad at this. That was all I was doing initially, was like, help, I'm pinned down, okay? So I'm totally trying to change this and communicate and be more preventative about how I'm asking for prayer. If you message regularly and you create maintenance coverage prayer, you don't get pinned down as much, okay? So remember truth and authority when you ask for prayer. You set the tone for your intercessors by how you're asking for prayer. So are you a helpless victim of warfare, or are you a daughter of the king asking for backup to finish your mission? All right? So think about that. Ask for declaration and decrees of what you know the Lord wants and what he has spoken over your life, your ministry, your business. We can petition as a child, absolutely, but we're also priests and kings, okay? We are lambs, but we're also war horses, all right? And so we need to remember that and step into that authority as we ask for the prayer and intercession. Melanie pointed out this fun tidbit too. Intercessors get the fun of delegated authority. And they get to impact people they've never met in a realm they may not even be called to because they're praying for you. And because you are working in that realm and they're covering you, they get some of the glory. They get some of the, the heavenly kickback, so to speak, of what you are doing in your ministry. Like if I'm interceding for someone to end sexual trafficking, I may not be in that field, but I'm helping win battles in that area. Isn't that kind of cool? Yeah. So I want to step into talking a little bit about paid intercession and the Apostolic Intercessor Network. So what if you feel like you don't have the time to set this up? And you're like, this sounds too overwhelming to maintain this and keep this going. Well, I had just been talking with a good friend of mine on the phone while I was driving to this wedding about paid intercession, and that this was just a fascinating new concept for me, and I wanted to learn more about it. And then at the reception, I end up sitting next to this lady, Melanie Boudreau from Apostolic Intercessor Network. I was like, what do you do? She's like, I'm a paid intercessor. I'm like, no way. And I was just like, tell me everything, And so we connected at the wedding, and then we actually connected again later, and she was so gracious to just spill all these tips and helpful things to me about how best practices on setting up a prayer shield. So Apostolic Intercessor Network, Melanie has worked there for 14 years. That ministry was started to help cover Christian leaders for Jesus in all 7 mountains of influence, not just pastors and churches, but all 7 mountains of influence. Now, if you're in a business or ministry, keeping up a whole team can sound kind of like you don't have the time to spare for that, but that's where paying someone to organize it for you can be really a lifesaver. So the benefits of paid intercession, you don't have to maintain it yourself. Somebody else is doing that for you. Somebody else is keeping the intercessors engaged with the updates and typing those up for them. Somebody else is calling you and pulling the update from you, asking you questions. What do you need prayer for? Where's your warfare at? How are things going? Someone else is making sure the intercessors are accountable and actually praying for you and not just saying they're praying for you. The intercessors are not in contact with you at all. They don't even know who you are when you work with Apostolic Intercessor Network. So the info they share from God and what they're hearing from the Lord is completely unadulterated. Okay. And so I wanted Chris Langworthy to actually come up because she's actually using Apostolic Intercessor Network right now and just give her experience with them. Yeah. Yes, that would be a good plan. Here we go.
All right. So just a quick summary, like we said, sometimes when you start out, you don't have a paid team, right? And when I started, I didn't. When I started launching what I do today, I didn't. But years ago, I had been down at IHOP in Kansas City, and they had introduced the concept of paid intercessors, and it had always been kind of this thing inside me that there's going to be a point when I need to step across that line. And so I had friends informally, whatnot. In the last year, where it's like we're getting to that point. You're stepping into bigger platforms. You need to, and it was like, what I realized my hindrance is I didn't think what I did was that big of a deal. Like, I mean, it's like these weird little whispers, right? These things that sit back there. And he's like, Chris, even how I had to step into self-care and exercising and eating healthy was, I don't do it for me. I do it so I can be a better mom and so that I can be here long term for my kids. And I was like, oh, okay, so if I have an intercessor, it's helping me help them. It's about them. It's off of me, and that somehow made it easier. So we had been talking one day, and you had said something about this wedding and whatnot, and I'm like, oh man, okay, because there's a whole story, but the Lord's just been showing me, I will provide the resource when you need it. I'll show you the next step when you need it. And so it was like, okay, so I checked it out, and everything aligned. And I think that's one thing you haven't said point blank, but I'd call out is, do they align with your thought patterns? When you said, do they have a victorious mindset? That's totally something I'm passionate about, because I had too many people that I would ask pray and they'd be like, well, and I'm like, you're not helping. This is not going the direction I want to go. So working with them has been amazing. I can tell you that the best way I can describe it is that since I stepped into this place of working with them, it's like, remember on the old radios when we'd actually tune them, it wasn't digital, and we'd actually like finesse it just a little bit to get past the static, but it was like you wanted to get that sharper signal. That's the way I feel in the last 4 months since I've been working with them, is I feel like things have gotten sharper. There's been conversations we've had. They started with me being interviewed for like 2 or 3 hours, like just talk to us about who you are, what you do, and just the ministry time of validating, yeah, this is why God's calling you here. This is part of what you're, different things. But it's just helped sharpen some things. And then just like in the last few weeks, we've had some family situations, and it's been so refreshing just to be able to text Judy and say, hey, Judy, can you let the team know this is what's going on? Hey, Judy, this is what's going on. And like today, there's some drama going on in a network I'm a part of. I'm like, hey, Judy, this is what's going on. And what she's really clear on is we're not going to take over and do all the prayer for you. She's like, we count on you being part of your own shield. She's like, I want you praying for yourself and praying for your family and your clients as well. We're just that if one can put 1,000 to flight, 2 can put 10,000. So I want to keep it short and tight, because I know you don't. Any questions?
I have just a couple questions, like maybe there's a range, but how expensive is that?
And so that it does have a range. And
Yeah.
so I'm at an entry level because that's where my business can afford right now.
Yeah.
And they had someone who is interning. They actually train up their teams and they intern them. And so they brought on, I have an extra person on my team right now because she's an intern. They're like, hey, we think we might be able to slide so-and-so onto your team. And I don't know who my team is. I just know Judy. And so she disperses it out, and it's been great because, yeah, I sent a text to her last night. She takes care of it. And then every week I have it back there in my folder, but every week they send me probably like 1.5 pages of declarations that they've been crafting and praying over my business and whatnot, and things. And what's fun is Judy's like, if there's things that we're hearing or feeling, she's like, I craft them in, and she's got scriptural verses that are going with the declarations and whatnot. So it's been fun because sometimes there's stuff that I'm like, oh shoot, I never told Judy about that. Oh, there it is. So it's been kind of fun.
Holy Spirit had you covered.
So that didn't answer your question directly, Heidi, but there is, or Holly, I'm sorry, there is I'm at the base level down here, so.
I'm sure we can go on the website and get more information.
I don't know if they actually put dollar bills on the website. I think they want you to have a conversation with them and have it, that's very relationally driven, so.
How many are on your team?
4.
You know how many.
Oh, I'm sorry, yep, there are 4. Your question was how many are on my team? There's 4 on my team. And I only know Judy. I know the other 3 ladies. Don't know their names. I don't have any clue who they are. So,
Thank you.
yeah, it's been great.
Yeah, thank you. It's helpful to have somebody who's been working with them.
Oh,
Is it a local business? Or is it national?
this one,
You probably know mine.
so the gal that I work with is out of down by Texas, and then the team is across the nation. So I don't know where they're all from. The fun part for me has been, it's maybe my strategic part of my brain, is I get to have them pray over my clients as well. So like my clients that I'm working with, I'm always like, okay, so is there something you want me to pass on to my intercessors? Or something somewhere in that space. If there's something going on, I'll pass it on to them. Not necessarily always ask, but I kind of, hey, but I don't divulge who they are. It's private. I'll say I have a client wrestling with this.
Yeah.
Pray for that.
So we all get the benefit.
You do. You do.
That's awesome. So no matter how exactly you choose to create a prayer shield, get one going. This is the one thing I'll yell at people about. Like, get a prayer shield going. Don't do ministry, don't do life as a Christian without having somebody that you are partnered with in prayer. It is so much harder. And just don't do it because you don't have to. Let's work together in the kingdom. Get one going. Everyone needs to have somebody covering them in prayer. And so don't be a lone soldier in the kingdom. It's dumb, okay? It gets you creamed. You don't have to be dragging through your ministry or through your business or through your family stuff. Get help and just soar in what God has called you to do. And help more people on the time that you have on this planet by having a team. So think about, how could a prayer shield help you be better at what you do? about that? How could it help you be better? How could it help it be easier? How committed are you to taking some action on this? And what's your first step? Okay, write it down. And let me pray for you. Jesus, thank you so much for each and every one of these women, each and every one of these churches and businesses and ministries and families that is represented here today, and everyone who will listen to this video. Father, I pray that you would motivate them to team up with other people, team up with other believers, and that they would cover each other, Lord, in prayer, and that together, through the power of prayer and your Holy Spirit, that we would be even more efficient and effective at what you have called us to do, that we would not drop the baton, but that we would keep it going, Lord. And so I just bless and ask that you would cover each of these people with your protection, with your wisdom, your insight, and your angelic coverage. I woke up to the song Angel Armies this morning and I just started laughing. I'm like, of course, because he's the God of angel armies. He's the God that covers us. So I just pray your blessing in Jesus' name. Amen.